The First Million Words, Episode 8, Dialogue, he said, with Michael J. Sullivan.
If you did go to my website, on the right-hand side, over the years, well, not over the years, but over the last year, I wrote a series of writing advice essays, and there's 25 of them that, and they've covered everything we've talked so far about. So, if you wanted more information, you could always go there and look at them. They're in order.
I think the first one of those I found was on voice.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, and that's why I was like, oh yeah, we definitely got to talk about character development dialogue. Yeah. So when with dialogue, I think that's another thing that's really heavily influences how the reader identifies with the character.
Mm-hmm.
How, when you're writing the dialogue, like how much thought do you put into giving the character their own voice and making sure that everybody doesn't talk the same? And I mean, do you put like a little note when you're writing a specific character that says, hey, make sure not to talk like this character? Because that's what I kind of do.
Well, no, I don't go to that extreme. I can usually remember in my head how each of the characters sound.
Yeah.
Some of the things, I actually talked to someone once, and they said, you have to make sure that person can tell who's speaking before they see the dialogue tag. And so that was an interesting thought. But how I did it in a number of different ways. I'm sure everyone does it in a number of different ways. One of the tricks I used in this series was when I'm writing a noble, particularly a noble who's speaking in a crowd or addressing people in a formal manner, they never use contractions.
Yeah.
However, if you're writing anyone else, they do. So like Royce and Hadrian speak in very common language that we would use today, so they use contractions all the time. Then if you go down below that to someone who's considered less educated, then you start using ain'ts, and you start even taking the contractions to more of an extreme.
Yeah, and also I think there's another level of that is the sailor language that we see a lot in the Emerald Storm.
Oh, right, yes. Yeah. So that's how that breaks down. And then, of course, if you really get down in education, you start dropping words. And initially, and you probably never saw this because you didn't read the originals, but in the original form of Emerald Storm, the Arandaban, who is the warlord, he had a very heavy accent, and it was so extreme that you actually kind of had to translate it a little bit. But it was, I thought, funny as hell, because the way he said things was just hilarious, and they had a very unique an accent, which I wrote in. But when a lot of people read it, they said it was hard to read, and when Orbit read it, they agreed that they thought it would have been better if I had, instead of writing phonetically, that if I just tried to get the same effect by dropping words. So that's what I ended up rewriting. And the reason I did that, and the reason I agreed with that, was because I used to remember reading, I think it was Richard Adams, he had a book called Plague Dogs, and it's written in heavy Cockney English. And I really did have a hard time reading it. It was becoming very annoying. So since my mantra through this whole story was to make the writing as easy as possible, I didn't want to introduce something that would be difficult. So I trimmed that out. But you can get the same effect by just dropping out words that are supposed to be there. It's just so you can tell the person is not fluent in the language. As opposed to what actually Orbit wanted me to do, which was to just say they had an accent and then write without one. Which people have done, but it really stole from the humor of how he was pronouncing his words.
Yeah, I would love to see that. I gotta go find a copy of the Emerald Storm, then the original. I'd like to see how it was originally.
Yeah, we do have a character that we need for that. That we need that for.
yeah, we actually. Yeah, Guillermo. I love that. I envy Guillermo his dialogue writing ability. Like when we're writing our book together, I'm like, hey, why don't you cover this part with the dialogue?
When you have like as a Arandaban, he's like, he is dirt, he is pig in dirt. Yeah, and he has a very, very sort of almost French kind of sounding accent. And
that's kind of how I heard him when I was reading the Orbit version. was like, I am bright star in sky,
Yes, yeah. That's how he's talking, because he was dropping all of his, I think, his H's were dropping into V's.
Mm-hmm.
He is very strange like this. I do not understand. So he's talking in this very heavy French accent, and when you read it, it's kind of hilarious. But when you drop all those phonetic letters, it does become, oh, what did you say? Because it then becomes, if you're consistent, it looks almost like gobbledygook. You're like, okay, E is V da.
Yeah. Too many apostrophes.
Right. So that was always a problem. That's why I dropped it out.
Yeah, and I wonder, Guillermo, do you have any questions? Because I know I always tend to kind of steamroll through it. Yeah.
Oh no, just I'm completely following along with the different, not using contractions for, there's one character, and the main character of my book is completely self-absorbed and completely aloof of the fact that he's not nearly as powerful as he thinks he is, and he's a lot less important than he thinks he is. So yeah, using that and then differentiating between that, I've had people tell me that they can tell who's actually talking even if I don't say who said whatever. But yeah, it's that's such a good point.
Yeah, and then there's the words you use. Obviously, if the person is highly educated, you go all out with much larger words. And then, of course, you have person of lesser education. You have to keep your words simple. And I've done that before. I'd be writing Hadrian, and I'd suddenly write something that was rather eloquent, and I go, oh, no, that's someone else. I have to change those words and tone them down.
Uh-huh.
And every once in a while, I'll run into that where I forget who I'm writing. But usually it works out pretty well because I can remember how they all talk. But and that's kind of the problem, is that Royce and Hadrian, like, it goes beyond dialogue in the respect that when you're writing, you want to avoid cliches. So whenever you write something along the lines of, it's stuck out as much as, and you don't want to write, something that people would recognize. You want to write something that would actually apply to the story and to the character if you can. Mm-hmm. And since I was writing about Royce, I was thinking, like, what would Royce think sticks out? I'm like, oh, like a knife in a man's back.
Yeah. Much better than a sore thumb. Yeah.
Right. So you immediately have to rewrite those things. And those are the ones I actually find problems. I'll be writing along and I'll write a cliche and it's perfect. And I'm like, but I can't use it. What else could I come up with? Yeah. and that's kind of the things. But so you have to kind of, when you're writing dialogue, you think the way the person's thinking. And of course, in Royce, he's always thinking in the sense of cold-blooded killer, whereas Hadrian is very idyllic, and so he comes up with different things. Mm-hmm. And Arista, of course, thinks very well educated. Salder is very educated. So their language is always, like, Salder is like always on stage. Mm-hmm. Whenever he's talking very eloquently, and he's like giving a speech every time he talks to someone. So he's always using very flowery words and such.
Yeah, and like always as if he were talking to grandchildren.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he's very condescending. Mm-hmm. And he always had a variation where he's always saying, my dear. Mm-hmm. Whenever he talks to a woman, he always say, oh, yes, my dear. So that was something that was always his little endearment. And, of course, if you remember the captain on the Emerald Storm, he's always going by God, because he's always very, flamboyant in his elocution. It's always over the top. He's like, oh my God, I can't believe it. So he's always flying off the handle. So knowing the personality and the types of words they would be using, and of course Royce, who is very taciturn, he hardly ever speaks at all. Yeah. And I've had people rewrite my dialogue when they were editing it, and I'm like, oh no, they don't talk that way. First of all, Royce never uses that many words.
Yeah.
So you know that one character doesn't talk much, and the other one just runs on and constantly talks. So those are other things you can keep in mind to make them identify with the language that they're using.
Yeah, I always liked, like with Royce not talking much to other people, it always made those times when he was talking to, Hadrian or Gwen in the story, where he actually did open up, it, it made that different. A lot more. Yeah, it made it kind of special,
Right.
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to ask too about dialogue tags, because that was another thing. Like any creative writing classes I took, they always said, don't pepper in anything. Just put in like he said, he asked, she said, she asked, like that. When I started reading Theft of Swords, the Crown Conspiracy had a lot of he replied, and a lot of he told them or he informed. Was that something too that you just wanted to do differently, or was that just kind of how it naturally came out?
That was just because I didn't know how to write that. I would more likely have taken more of those out in retrospect. That was just not knowing as much as I should have when I was writing that story. However, that said, I mean, I think that you can use said, asked, replied. Those all work fine. And the reason that goes back to the exact same thing I was saying before about the word the and it can be used over and over and no one cares. The same thing with said, the, asked, replied. Those are all fine. When you start using more elaborate ones, they stick out. Using it once, using it, occasionally is fine, I think, but when you start using it more than once, if you use informed twice in a couple chapters, people will notice it and will bother them. So you don't want to have that. And if I did that, that would have been actually a mistake that I shouldn't have done. But more so than that, I've actually come to the conclusion that if it's better that if you can manage it, not to have tags at all. That if you can use action tags, or if you can simply infer who's talking, either through paragraphing or through the dialogue itself, it works much better because I've always come to the conclusion that tagging dialogue is telling. You're actually stopping, pausing, and telling the reader something that wouldn't actually occur in real life. You would hear that dialogue, but no one say, "Oh," and Ben said, it doesn't come out that way. So it's taking you out of the flow of the story. So if you can actually eliminate that entirely, as much as you can. Now, the problem is when you have a group of like 3 or more people, and you're ripping through several bits of dialogue, you have to tag and let people know. Otherwise, having action tags would become obnoxious. It's like, and he picked up an apple. It's like, and all the way through it would become annoying. So in those situations, you have to default to it. But I tried, for the most part, to eliminate any tags at all by simply being clever about how I wrote it. So you're never in doubt. If I read a line of dialogue and I know that due to that dialogue, no one's ever going to question who that is, then I don't tag it. I don't even put an action tag on it. Otherwise, I'll try and hook it onto a paragraph where someone else has done something or they've spoken before. Or if it's in opposition with someone else, whereas one person talking and another person talking, then I'll wait 5 lines before I tag it again. Just so that I can let it go as far as I can without having that. Because the number of tags, I find tags to be annoying. So if you can get by with knowing that the reader is not going to get lost about who's talking, then I try and do that. But I generally don't like using he said, she said, or anything if I can avoid it.
Yeah, I had that same problem with, which is why a lot of when I write, I'm like, I'm just going to have 2 people talking and just, everybody else is off to the side. Because it is just annoying having to, take that pause. Because, like you said, it doesn't happen. Like, there's no voice that comes down and says, he said.
Right.
Yeah.
And it kind of turns an argument into like, wait, what? I don't know.
Yeah, kind of.
You kind of get lost in who's talking, and it's difficult. Yeah,
and when you were talking earlier during the interview about kind of asking yourself questions about plot, like challenging yourself to do that. Do you find yourself doing the same thing with dialogue? Like, do you say it out loud and then think to yourself, well, how would this person react to it?
No. Dialogue is extremely simple for me, and I usually think that it's extremely simple for most people. And the reasoning I have behind that is that because we all talk. Yeah. We all have conversations. We all have had dialogues. We hear people, even unusual people. We know how they speak. You've heard French accents. You've heard Southern accents. You've heard, sophisticated accents and less sophisticated accents. And these are things that you have common knowledge with and first-hand knowledge with. So it's fairly easy to construct generally believable dialogue if you pay attention. However, you never hear someone say, I walked into the dining room table had a white lace conflict that was catching the sunlight coming into the light, and it was, no one does that. So description is hard for most people because they don't do it. They don't have any experience doing it. They don't know how to do it. So that becomes the hardest thing for most writers that I've ever met, is writing good, compelling description. Dialogue's easy. I mean, everyone, right between the two of us, we have been having this conversation. And so writing, if you were to then sit down and just off the top of your head try and recreate this dialogue, it shouldn't be that hard. And you can do it very simply. You go to any coffee shop, sit down with your laptop, and I've actually done this where I've overheard conversations and written down verbatim what they said. And you never want to write dialogue like that. You never want to actually write what people would say because it's inane. It's ridiculous.
Yes.
I mean, you would listen to a conversation, the conversation would go like this. Well, he said, well, it was the other thing. No, wait, maybe it was. I don't know. that's the kind of conversations you hear.
Yeah.
Because that's how people really talk. And if you were to write that, it would drive your readers insane.
Yeah,
So,
I love that, for a while there was, like, I when I was, 16, 17, I was really into, Chuck Palahniuk, who wrote, Fight Club and Survivor, all those books. And I remember people saying, like, oh, he writes just like how people talk. And the dialogue is so, like, believable like that. And I, was reading the books, and I was like, this, that may seem that way, because the things they're saying are, like, believable, but that's really not how people talk.
No. If you actually listen, they're very different.
Yeah, like you were saying, it's really kind of how people talk is, boring.
Yeah, and it's annoying because you have stutters. You have, like, my wife. She does a lot of speeches, and it just drives me crazy hearing her. And I'm sure I'm doing it right now. But she'll start off in an idea, then she'll stop, then she'll go shift over to another one to explain the first one, and she'll start in that. But then she realizes she'll think of something else, and she'll jump to that, and then she goes back, and then there's an and there's another and you're like, my God, you want to strangle someone. So when you're writing, you have to edit all that out. So you want to have the words that they say. You want to have the colloquialisms that they say in some of the pattern, but you have to edit out all the crap that we, I think, as human beings, tend to filter out anyway. Just the same way we filter out the repetitiveness of ands, or when we read tags, we don't see the seds because of the fact that it becomes, a reflex that we just don't hear that. We register it as being something that is mechanical in the background, but we don't register it as part of the dialogue. So I think that's what we tend to do. And so writing that is you have to mentally edit that part out and then try and keep the more realistic portions.
Yeah, that's kind of how you do mentally filter that out when people are talking too, because just look at Obama. People are like, oh, he's the great orator and he's great with speeches, and he is. But if you would read a literal transcript, there's a lot of knows and ums and pauses like that. But you just can't put that into your dialogue. Is like ... what I'm saying?
Yeah, just what you just said. If you were to write that in actual language, you had a lot of pauses, a lot of em dashes, a lot of ellipses were just in what you just said, because most people have require pausing and thinking, and you don't have that in dialogue when you're writing a story. People speak fluently and it flows right out, and there's never a pause or a question or hesitancy usually, unless you're making a point, unless it's for a specific reason. And most people pause just because their brain locked up for a second and went, oh, what was I thinking? Okay, yes. Or they just can't find that word. Oddly enough, when people are writing dialogue, they never miss or they never have a problem finding the right word.
Yeah.
People also use the exact same words over and over and over again. And a lot of LOI words, which are terrible adverbs, and they use them constantly, but you'll never find that in a written word because it's bad writing. Even in dialogue, people don't do that because it's just considered bad and it's annoying. And people don't like to annoy readers.
Yeah. That's one of the key things to keeping your audience is don't annoy them. So, Guillermo, did you have any final questions or anything from your end on dialogue?
No. I think we've covered it. It's I don't know, some good tips, because there's some things that I was like inside my head. I'm thinking, wait, I kind of do that. Oh man, okay, yeah, that is annoying. I got to stop.
All right, so I think what we can take away from that: don't be annoying.
Yeah, be less annoying.
Be less annoying, and don't write how people actually talk.
So you're going to write that on a yellow sticker, and you're going to stick it on your forehead.
Yes.
Be less annoying.
Oh, I have a
you're aiming high.
Yeah. I have that. I'm going to put that on my. I have that little sticky note program.
And all the action spots with Grim stuff.
Oh, fun.
Because like the way I kind of figured it out, it's like he because they at one part him and Steve have knives thrown at their heads, but they cower just in time to move out of the way, and it sticks against the wall, and then Grimstone pulls him out, and he's like, it's like, go Steve, get Ness out of here, I'll deal with the Hicks. As he's about to come go at the trolls, he pauses, and he's like, Grimstone muttered to no one in particular. Murder's probably wrong.
Oh, I like that. I like that you're actually writing the novel as we're recording an episode.
Yeah, I was like, well, I'm just gonna write while Ben while Ben comes on, and then I'm like, oh, okay. So I was sitting here like wondering, I'm like, how do I do this so that it's non-lethal? I'm like, and how do I make it so that Grimstump is like,
A little upset about it.
Yeah, but it fits with the character perfectly, where he just sits there and goes, oh, yeah, murder's probably wrong.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, your main sidekick is a stoner goblin, and I love that there was one part where they go to Steve's family's funeral, which also for an epic fantasy having the main character named Steve is awesome too. I love that they go and to his grandfather's funeral, and Grimstump the goblin is wearing a tuxedo T-shirt.
Yeah,
yeah, I thought that would be funny. That was a good touch.
I don't know. It seems like I kind of have, like the stuff I'm writing, I find funny. Mm-hmm. So I'm just like, oh, okay, this is probably the funniest things that I've written so far is chapter 7 and 8.
Nice.
Because, they're like, they go to they kind of end up lost, and they show up at this like swamp place. It's kind of like, I kind of pictured it like south of the border.
That's after the strip club?
Yeah, this is after the strip club because Steve kind of freaks out and then doesn't realize where he's driving. He's just trying to get away. And then they realize, oh, you've kind of been driving for several hours and we don't know where we are. So they kind of happen across this. I just pictured south of the border with gators and trolls. So
gators
it's kind
trolls.
of. And I'm like, oh, let me just populate with redneck trolls, because I love writing redneck trolls because it's so much. Like there's so much comedy in just like the kind of like the I don't know. Well, you have to read it. It's I really enjoyed. I'm really having a lot of fun writing this.
Well, I look forward to reading it. Sometimes you can tell a lot when you're having fun writing something. It conveys in the reading process.
Yeah. I don't like writing sad stuff.
Yeah.
But I love writing funny or just where like one character is just really stubborn and it just completely flusters everyone else.
Yeah.
So that's why I like writing Grimstump so much, because it's not like he's trying to be a dick, but he just is naturally.
He just is naturally. Yeah, I know other people that are like that.
Exactly. But yeah, he's a dick on purpose on a couple occasions on chapter 8, but that's just because he's bored.
Okay.
He's bored and he likes to troll.
Yeah, like trolling. Yeah. He's a goblin who trolls.
Exactly.
Nice. Since we've just played the episode featuring dialogue with Michael J. Sullivan.
Yeah.
How is your dialogue coming along in there? Because I know it might be a little rough writing the redneck troll accent, because there are no such things as redneck trolls.
Well, I just kind of picture rednecks and then substitute trolls. But like the thing is they're
oh, okay.
But they're just, the thing is they're really, the trolls they're like really friendly and nice. Like I don't know, like southern people, when you meet them are usually pretty nice, as long as you don't tell them that you're gay or black. But no, they're people from the South are I found are genuinely like really nice. Like, have you ever gone to a Waffle House in Georgia?
Not in Georgia. Well, actually, I may have. I don't know. I've been on the road a lot in the past, so maybe.
Okay, because they're like, you get a smile and a good service. At least when I've gone, I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then like when you go up north, they just kind of stare at you until you decide until they get tired of waiting for you to order or waiting for you to read their minds, and they're like, what?
Yeah. Well, sometimes that kind of has a reverse effect too, because I think the closer you get, like at one point, you go so far south that you're out of the South, because that's where we live in South Florida and Central Florida respectively. So it's like once you get to a certain point, like past the panhandle and down a little further, people kind of start getting dicky again. Yeah. There's the heat.
Yeah, that, and I don't know. Maybe it's just big city living, as they call it. But I don't know. It's just I've met a really like a lot of really nice Southern people.
Yeah.
and that kind of comes across in what I'm writing. And the thing is, I can't, like, I tried to do the whole thing where it's just like, instead of when they say Steve growled, I'm like, well, he didn't literally growl it, but he growled it.
Yeah, I'm actually right now I'm going through the second book of Joe Abercrombie's The First Law series or trilogy. And there's this one character who does an awful lot of hissing. Yeah,
there's people like that. Yeah. They just talk, but I figure if I put it in, they'll know that this character isn't really barking. Yeah, but his voice sounds like barking.
Yeah, that's something we kind of covered with Michael in the dialogue episode.
No, I mean, I like, okay, well, he does it his way, I'll kind of do it mine. Yeah. I mean, granted he's kind of, the one who's published, and I'm the one who's never finished anything. Yeah. Let me just give it a try,
Speaking of that, that's always something I keep meaning to ask our authors that I just kind of forget to. We've done quite a few interviews in advance. We have everything down up until, I think, August. I think all the way through August, we have shows ready to go. So I'm happy about that. And I keep, except maybe with the last 2 or 3, I keep forgetting to ask, well, how do you go about finishing a novel? Like what do you do that helps you finish? Because both of us are still kind of in that limbo where we're not really finishing stories. And it's like enthusiasm, priority, and fear, I think, is the enthusiasm, because you keep that ending in sight and it gets fun and you want to finish. And then what was the second one? Oh yeah, well, enthusiasm. And then what was the second thing I said?
Priority.
Oh yeah, and it's like you want to get it done because it's important to you. And then the third, fear, is that whole thing about if you don't get this book written, you're not going to get it published, and therefore you will be working at the Waffle House until the end of your days.
Well, I don't know. If you like working the Waffle House, then I'm all okay.
Yeah, by all means, keep working at the Waffle House.
But I'm just like, my job is horrible. It's like a little piece of me dies every day when I come home. When I log into that computer. So I'm just like, I think I want to, I'll give this a shot. And even if it doesn't work out, then I'll just write another one.
Yeah.
And maybe that one will hit.
And at least you're doing something fun.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a welcome departure from the having to deal with reality. I'm like, hey, I can write my own reality. And in my reality, there's stoner goblins.
Yeah. And speaking of reality, kind of a more serious note, I guess. There's some of my favorite authors that are out there right now, Michael Sullivan included, and also Brandon Sanderson and Patrick Rothfuss. You think of them as overnight success stories, but they really put in a lot of work. Like Michael said, he wrote 13 stories or 13 full novels until he got published. Same thing with Brandon Sanderson, who's the big guy out there right now. He wrote like upwards of 13 complete books until he got published. And with Patrick Rothfuss, he wrote The Name of the Wind. Actually, he wrote the entire 3-book series, The Kingkiller Chronicle, years ago, maybe at least a decade ago, and shopped it around, never got it published. So that's another thing with enthusiasm and sticking to it. It's like don't get discouraged.
Exactly. Like, okay, you're dating a chick and it doesn't work out. Are you gonna get depressed and never date again? No. You get on that horse and you try again. And if that one doesn't work out, then there's always porn.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I don't know why that reminded me. Oh yeah, because we were talking about it earlier. Did you finish reading The Name of the Wind?
Yes, I did.
I know I recommended that to you. Did I buy that for you?
Yes, you did actually.
I did. Yeah, it was the audiobook. It was amazing.
I liked it. I'm just like the way it's set up. It's just it's you kind of gives you a taste of what the future what to kind of expect in the future, because you hear about this this guy, and then you see him, and you don't really think much of him, but then he starts a story, and I don't know, it's kind of cool, like listening to how everything kind of works out. But yeah, after like listening to it, then I have to like I don't know, I'm so busy with like writing that I usually don't have time to read as much as I'd like.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
but
I have the biggest to read list right now, and some of them are I have to finish reading books of authors that we've interviewed so that I can put a review up before their episodes go up.
Yeah, and
I may force you to do some of those.
Oh, I will try. It's just with like work, it's like I'm constantly like I don't have like a second to breathe, and and then like after a certain time, usually it slows down. But lately they've decided, it's a little too slow, so we're just gonna have one person taking calls. So that's you're up.
Yeah, one person versus the entirety of the state of Florida, pretty much.
It's like, well, we have 4 million customers, so I think one representative was okay.
I wonder if anybody out there can guess what it is exactly that you do.
Okay, imagine...
or what company you work for.
The way I figure, it's kind of like going to work, and your job is to get kicked in the nuts every 4 minutes or so, or 3 or 4 minutes.
Sounds about right, yeah.
And some kicks are a little bit harder. Some kicks are a little bit softer. Other times they don't really kick you at all. They just kind of, stare and then walk away. But for the most part, you get kicked in the balls. And imagine that happening for 8 hours a day with 2 15-minute breaks. And that is my job.
Nice. That sounds like the most soul-crushing thing I've ever heard, and I feel really sad for you.
Yeah, it's okay. Sometimes. But other times I'm just like, wow, I need to get published like now.
Well, that means you got to finish that book, man.
Exactly. I'm like, okay, first of all, I got to finish this book that I'm working on. Then I have to go back and redo the first one I started, and kind of gave up on because I realized, oh, well, funny things are happening, but to no end. It's like what's the point of
Well, I think that falls under that enthusiasm thing too. Is if you're having fun writing it, then that means your story is always moving forward, getting closer to the end, and I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah. I'm just like that's what I want to do. I'm just like I want to write like a cool thing that even if no one else likes it, at least I've finished a novel.
Yeah.
And
you can say that.
Yes, exactly. And then I could put writer down on my resume. Then when I get published, I can put down author. And then people are going to be like, oh, really? What do you write about? Stoner Goblins.
Stoner Goblins, a guy's named Steve.
Don't call us. We'll call you. Aww.
Oh. Oh, well, you didn't want that job anyway, so...
No.
I think we had a good rant there. We pretty much covered what we've been doing this week. Except I've been not doing as much writing as I would have hoped to do in a week. I have been playing Arkham City.
Those will suck you in, man.
Yeah,
Batman games. It's like, wait a minute. So you're telling me I can be Batman? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, yeah, you could have been. Yeah, exactly. And you could have been Batman on a lot of other games. I'm like, yeah, but the Batman on the Nintendo was okay. But I'm like, dude, this lets me be Batman.
Yeah, dude. I spent half the game, more than half the game, in detective mode because I'm stupid like that, and I'm I'm like, oh, maybe there's a Riddler trophy around here, and yeah, but that's kind of, and the camera angle is kind of annoying. Like, why does Batman always have to be to the left of center?
Yeah. I don't know. What? Well, like, he's rich, so probably go the other way. But then again, well, he kind of doesn't trust the justice system because he kind of goes around and punches people.
I think what we can take away from that is Batman is a conundrum wrapped inside of a question.
Oh, no, he's libertarian.
He's a complicated man. He's libertarian. There you go. Good.
I don't know.
Oh.
I'd try to avoid politics from now on because
that's a good idea.
It's monkeys flinging poo at each other.
It is. And you know what? Before I forget, because I meant to mention this, I put up the review of the short story compilation Space Battles, edited by our friend Brian Thomas Schmidt. 5 out of 5 stars, mostly just because it's so fun to sit there and just, take in a story and then move on to the next one, take in a story, move on to the next one, and they're all mostly fast moving and, a lot of energy because they are space battles.
Well, yeah, sometimes you want steak, sometimes you kind of want sliders,
Yeah.
Who knows?
But I mentioned in the review, because I always do this where I put up, I think that's kind of the thing about being a nerd, is that you tend to hate the things you love. So you always find something to complain about or nitpick, which is why we don't discuss the Star Wars prequels on the show.
Never, ever will we have, no.
Yeah.
Never.
But anyway, I mentioned that the last story in the book, which was co-written by Mike Resnick and Brad Torgerson? I'm not sure how to pronounce it. But I was a little underwhelmed with that last story because to me it didn't quite click.
Okay.
The technology was cool and the action was cool, but maybe I didn't have enough suspension of disbelief, because at the end I was like, oh, well, that's a great coincidence, and then I just I didn't feel that strong connection with the character that I was hoping to feel.
It's the will of the Force, Ben.
Yeah.
God, how many times do I have to tell you?
I know. But anyway, I got a message from Brian Thomas Schmidt, our friend. He said, I think you're wrong on that Mike Resnick story. No, actually, no, you know Brian. He said you're wrong.
Yeah.
He said you're wrong on the Mike Resnick story, and he said it was a great story, and it really, it was amazing how he got so much through in so few words, and I thought, well, that really, that's nice of Brian, because I gave his story a positive, sparkling review because I really liked it, and instead of saying, hey, thanks for the awesome review, he's like, you should give that other story a second look. He kind of came to the defense of his buddy, which is admirable. So I'm going to reread maybe I'll reread the whole Space Battles all in a row, and I'll reread that last story because like I said, it was really cool, and it's a Mike Resnick story, so he's pretty freaking epic. But maybe I just had too high expectations, but I'll give it another shot.
Well, Brian Thomas Schmidt is a much better man than I, because even if it was like, if someone liked my story in the short story book but not yours, I would completely throw you under the bus, because that's the kind of friend I am. No.
Thank you for that positive review, and you're totally right about that other story sucking.
Yeah,
it totally sucked.
It's like, I couldn't believe this. No, Brian Thomas Schmidt is a good guy.
Yeah, but. Anyway, after reading Space Battles, I was inspired to write my own Space Battles story. I don't think I mentioned this on the show. I'm working on that right now. I'm about 500 words in, and I'm trying to keep it to under 4,000. That's kind of the sweet spot, is 4,000. So I'm going to try for that, and it's kind of a samurai western in space. And I originally wanted to do science fantasy and have some magic in there, but I think I'm going to skip that because it's a little too much. So I'm just going with solar-powered mech suits.
Oh, okay, that works. I don't know. I have a problem where I can never say what I want to say in 4,000 words.
Yeah, it's tough. But
I started one, and then I was like, I realized, I'm like, oh, this is going to be at least 20,000 words. I'm like, okay.
That was my first attempt at a short story. Was 12,000 words. And most magazines or online things, they won't take you unless you're under like 8,000. Some of them 10,000. But most markets are like, they prefer around that, 3 to 5,000. Yeah,
and the thing is, mine was real kind of schlocky, because I thought I was going for funny, but apparently magazines don't really go for funny. They're
not all the time.
Serious.
Yeah, you gotta just kind of trickle the funny in. If it's all funny, then I guess I don't like it.
But I don't think there's not really a market for a demon cyborg. No, for a demon cyborg werewolf. Wait, I can't even remember what it was.
Wasn't it a wereshark?
A were-shark.
A were-shark. A demon were-shark, yeah.
Yeah.
Demon cyborg were-shark, yes.
Yeah, and I thought that it would kind of make it funny because it's just so ridiculous, and apparently not. Apparently they no one is amused. It's funny only to me.
Oh, I thought it was fun.
It's like a big inside joke that only I laugh at. Yeah.
And such is the story of my life.
Exactly. So it's kind of like you walk around and someone mutters, look at those window shades, and then you start laughing. People think you're crazy, but you're just remembering back to the time that you kind of had those those blinds that kind of you pull the string and the blinds go up, and you kind of put your wiener in there and you did that and just to see what it would do, and it really hurt. And you think about it now and it's really funny. No one knows that, so.
Yeah. So
you've never done that?
On that note, don't forget to listen to our show every week. We're gonna put them out Friday afternoons, I think, from now on. And next week we'll have our episode with Michael J. Sullivan discussing exposition, and it's our last episode with him. So until then, check us out on the web at fmwpodcast.com, and you can follow us on Twitter at fmwpodcast. And Guillermo likes to do naughty things with window shades.
I was a strange 12-year-old, man. Yeah, I can't help it. Apparently. I did weird things.
Well, at least you can look back and admit that. So, ladies and gentlemen, it was a fun show. We'll see you next week. And until then, I am Benjamin J. Love.
And I am Guillermo Uncomfortable Truth Velez.
Nice. Now, right. Oh. I am Guillermo Awkward Silence.
At least did you ever try wearing a Stretch Armstrong like a diaper?
I did not.
I'm weird then. Can't help it.